level up a few thousand degrees with the Lavahot Podcast and host Joseph Connell Jr. You'll hear from ordinary people who are doing extraordinary things, from tech startup CEOs and marketing professionals to authors, investors, and sales trainers. This show will be packed with information to help you level up in life or business, taking you from on fire up to lava hot.
Hello and welcome to the Lavahot Podcast. I'm your host, Joseph Connell. Today I have an individual that has a... Man, I normally never screw up. That's the second time today I've screwed up my intro.
Hey, you're good.
All right. Oh, just you went to Decatur, right?
Yeah.
Cool. Born and raised here in the area?
Yep.
Cool. All right. And now you live where? New York? Did I hear that correctly? Okay.
Yep.
All right. Hello and welcome to the Lavahot Podcast. I'm your host, Joseph Connell. Today I have a hometown boy, is what I'm going to call him. He's from the same area that I grew up, went to the same high school, has a rather impressive resume. I'm not even sure how we've never met. I know that we have some friends. In fact, my first guest on this show was a gentleman named Nathan Bourne, who I know this individual's friends with as well, kind of running those same paths of that B2B startup space. But let me dive right into Ryan's background. So Ryan Shank is currently running Cameo Ventures, a startup studio that starts and invests in early stage technology companies and digital assets. In the past 5 years, he's invested in over 27. He's made over 27 investments ranging in industries, a B2B SaaS marketplace, D2C, and fintech. Ryan started his career as the chief operating officer of mHelpDesk, a B2B SaaS company that provides field service software to small to mid-sized businesses. Ryan helped grow mHelpDesk to over $1 million in annual recurring revenue before raising any outside funds. mHelpDesk was ultimately acquired by HomeAdvisor in 2014. Ryan stayed on with mHelpDesk for about 2 years after the acquisition, ultimately left to start a new company in 2016, which was PhoneWagon. I'm looking forward to kind of diving a little bit into that. Founded PhoneWagon, a call analytics software company that helps small and medium-sized businesses track inbound phone calls from marketing campaigns. After raising less than $2 million in venture capital and growing the business to over $1.5 million in annual recurring revenue, PhoneWagon was acquired by PhoneRail in 2021. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Excited to chat today.
Yeah. So, hey, I when I saw your bio, and I know you were in the same grade as my wife from what I gathered, and she said, hey, you got to have on Ryan. And I have been familiar with you. Nathan Bourne, good friend of mine. He's always spoke very highly of you. So over the past couple of years, we both have been in that working with local to mid-sized companies. So your name has come up several times. And when he told me about PhoneWagon several years ago, I was like, yeah, I'm very familiar with the technology. I've used a variety of different call tracking softwares. Like CallRail was the one that I had primarily used, but, very impressed with the resume. I mean, it seems like we have a similar background and a SaaS background, but, I want to start by understanding, what got you into that stuff?
So first, thanks for the kind words. And I've also heard amazing things about you. And I know, I saw that you were at, some of these local sort of like yellow page directory marketing companies, maybe before you're doing your current thing. So very kind of like in the same world. And I'll touch on that in a second. Actually, I'll be able to parlay right into that right now. So I actually got my start at a company called Yext. YEXT in 2010. So it was right out of school. I went to Clemson and I was a finance major, and I never even really knew about sales or startups. Like, this was sort of before the Social Network movie, and before it was cool. It was like not, at least maybe I was more like siloed from that world. But I basically didn't get any finance job out of school. And I got a job cold calling for a company called Yext in New York City. They were branded as the next Yellow Pages. And it's like, startup in meatpacking. They just raised some money, which I didn't really even know what that meant at the time. I was like, oh, that sounds cool. And basically what we were doing there, what they were doing is they were selling leads, but instead of a web form or like a online submit, it was phone calls. So they would use track numbers and they would drive phone calls to their clients. And then they would charge the clients when they would get a qualified phone call. It's called pay per call. And so that's when I sort of got introduced to the world of tech startups and just sales in general, especially outbound sales, SMBs. You know, you go to college, you don't think like, hey, I'm going to graduate and cold call plumbers in Arkansas for like 8 hours a day.
Right.
But that's, you know, what I was doing. And, you know, you sort of learn about this whole world of small businesses, HVAC contractors, carpet cleaning, pest control, you know, the whole gamut. And basically a lot of those service-based businesses, along with, you know, chiropractors, remodeling companies, personal injury lawyers, they want phone calls as their leads. They don't want just people, you know, web forms. It's a consultative sale. So anyway, so we were selling phone calls. So that's when I got like introduced to the whole world of like lead gen and, you know, even the notion of using a tracked phone number, and startups in general and venture and that sort of thing. So I was there for like a little less than a year. Then I moved down to Virginia and I won't go into the whole story because I'll let you sort of drive, but basically I met these guys that were, there's two guys from Lockheed Martin. They were software engineers. They had built this product called mHelpDesk. And it was, you know, at the time, you know, we eventually figured out sort of positioning and messaging and stuff, but they're like, hey, it's a help desk, you know, tool to create tickets for these service-based businesses, HVAC, plumbers, contractors. And I was like, oh, that's weird. Like I was just selling stuff to those guys. Like we should join forces. I'm like a sales guy now, or I thought it was, you know, I was like 23, 24. I'm like this big sales guy, I have like 8 months of experience. So like, I'm the guy. You know, so I was like, all right, we should join forces. You guys have this product. You know, I think I can sell. I was pretty confident at that time. I was like, I can sell. So like, let's all quit everything we're doing and then all go full time on mHelpDesk. And then that's sort of what we did. And sort of it was like off to the races. And I can tell that story later or whatever. But that's sort of how I got involved in the space.
Very cool. Yeah, so it's funny because I had a very similar background. So as you mentioned, my background when I first got into the marketing industry was Yellow Pages, little directory. It wasn't even like the big directory. It was the little directory on the eastern shore of Maryland, nothing but ocean and farmland.
What's it called?
It was the Local Book.
They eventually were a client. I'm pretty sure this lady's name was Bonnie. They were a client of PhoneWagon, the Local Book.
Yeah.
Yep.
Actually, absolutely was. And Bonnie. So it was a small family, small Mormon family that ran that entire company. And they had some very successful directories on the Eastern Shore. I think they had a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 6 directories. But they were also in Utah. They had, directories down in certain parts of North Carolina, I believe. But when I got into the industry, a buddy of mine was working for him, and I had just been laid off because a company that I was working for got acquired. And a buddy of mine reached out to me. He was like, hey, why don't you come work at the Local Book? And I was like, man, I don't feel like I'm not going to deliver phone books, because I had no clue what he was talking about. And he was like, no, you're going to sell advertising. And I was like, what do you mean sell advertising? It's phone books. He was like, well, you ever look in the book, you see the big pictures and all that. Those are ads. That was completely lost on me that was even advertising, and that the companies that had those ads were paying for them because they want leads. Like, that's how clueless I was to the space of marketing. And I was like, yeah, I think I could do that. Before that, I was working for, 84 Lumber, and, I've worked with contractors for years and years. And I went in, and my first training was with this guy who had been like a legend apparently in like the direct lead type of environment, especially Yellow Pages, but he's worked with like major companies. And that first week I went through this guy's training, and I fell in love with the idea of marketing and helping businesses. And almost 11 years later now, I went from that Yellow Page company to then getting recruited from the largest Yellow Page company in the country. And then that company ended up evolving into a SaaS company called Thrive that, is straight, their whole gamut was, and it still is now, is local business automation, where they focus on, like your website, CRM, integrating with campaigns, social media, everything all integrated into one. And that's when I first got introduced into SaaS products and call tracking and all that jazz. And they actually used Yext to power all the listings. So they had like a low listing claiming feature that was part of it. So it's very cool that you had a very similar start where it was like, it sounds like maybe you were just like me, kind of clueless to what what the value was of any of these platforms. But then you get introduced to it. And then for me, and it sounds like it was very similar, it became, almost like a passion to be able to provide products that can service local to mid-sized companies. But anyway, I digress on that. So let me carry it over. So you go on to become COO of mHelpDesk. You end up selling, that company ends up getting acquired. Then you go on to start PhoneWagon. And then from PhoneWagon, that was acquired, and now you're doing Cameo Ventures. So tell me a little bit about Cameo Ventures. So what do you guys have going on over there?
Yeah, so I mean, kind of before I get to Cameo Ventures, which by the way is like kind of just me figuring out what I'm doing, and then I'll loop in people, and but basically after mHelpDesk got acquired, I started getting liquidity, and I'm like, I'm really into startups, and I love the idea of, investing in companies, helping companies, a lot of things that we did at, mHelpDesk. That was where I just learned like everything, like the playbook. It changed my life, like everything, right? We grew the company to I think maybe like 80 employees, and like, it was just like a crazy ride. I was like 24 or 26, something like that. And, but anyway, I'm like become obsessed with startups at that time. I'm like, one of those like TechCrunch guys where I was checking it every day and just like so deep in the scene. And, after mHelpDesk and I start, PhoneWagon. So as I'm doing PhoneWagon, I'm making like angel investments. And at PhoneWagon, I went through Techstars, which is like a startup incubator, kind of similar to like a Y Combinator, right? So you have your cohort. I sort of wrote some small angel checks into a couple companies in my class. At the same time, I'm like, making other like smaller stuff and just like looking at stuff. So then, or looking at different companies, where can I add value, right? Because a lot of things, especially in SaaS, and really, I mean, just company building in general, there's a lot of commonalities in terms of like, hey, once you have sort of product market fit, it's like, how do we scale? And if it's this typical kind of SaaS, it's pretty like, SDR, AE model, hiring, building the team around you. It's right. Like, I don't want to say cookie cutter, but like there is a playbook, right? So it's like, hey, where can I add value? And then, so basically, after PhoneWagon was acquired, I basically was like, hey, let me sort of like package what I'm doing and say like, hey, I'm making angel investments. So there's like a small, call it like allocation of funds and capital sort of to deploy into startups based on sort of, it's my own money based on like kind of basically like exposure that I want into that, like call it asset class of like early stage startups, which is inherently high risk. And then I'm saying like, hey, like what the heck do I want to do next? Right? Like anything that I want to do. First of all, there's a lot of things that I'm interested in, and it's, I want to be diligent about sort of selecting that. So I'll kind of like go down this path of like, what's interesting, what's big, and where do I think that I can carve out an angle, or how I'd be able to like, add the most value and differentiate based on, tools that I think I have that potentially others don't, right? Like what's my superpower? And so then, we'll have different theses around, ideas and markets, creator economy. There's a lot of interesting stuff happening in like fintech and doing like fractional shares of like loans and stuff like that, right? So like, I'll like go down a path, or there's a huge like NFT craze that sort of I got sucked into for a little bit, but I've come up for air a bit. So it's basically that, right? So it's either like, hey, I'm looking at different ideas, and like there's like model startup studios that I think are like amazing, that are like aspirational, right? Like Rob Dyrdek has one called like something Dyrdek Machine. There's this one that this guy in Florida has, Jack Abraham. He sold Milo to eBay like a long time ago, and they've had like a bunch of different companies come out of their startup studio. So there's like models of startup studios. I'm kind of taking the approach of like, they pump out like tons, and they bring on teams, and there's tons of like outside capital, but mine's sort of like very smaller scale, where I'm like, hey, what's like interesting? and what do I think like I want to go down for the next 5 to 10 years, right? Like anything you do is going to be like a significant amount of time. And, arguably these are like the most valuable, like highest earning years of our life in terms of like health and just like age wise and stuff like that. So I'm trying to be like really diligent about figuring out like how I want to spend my time.
Yeah. So I want to ask this question just on, we'll say the sales and scaling side of things. So when you started PhoneWagon, what was that like startup phase like? Like what did that look like, that pathway to the point, just in the beginning all the way up to the point where you're selling it to CallRail?
So I'm glad you asked that. I think it's like rather interesting. And I actually wrote a blog post about how I like just kind of like built the product from scratch, and it's on Neil Patel's blog. It's called like How I Built and Launched a SaaS Company for Less Than 40K. And that's sort of like building just initial sort of like prototype. We use Twilio, a bunch of tools, landing page, pretty like, again, textbook stuff. But basically like, we had this product, right? So I'd used kind of call tracking tools in the past, and that summer 16, Twilio IPO'd, Dialpad was kind of coming out. So I was like, oh, this is interesting. And I had just come from mHelpDesk that got acquired by HomeAdvisor. And HomeAdvisor is a massive like lead gen company, right? It's a marketplace. Homeowners can go there. They can put their project in and it's a lead. But what we were hearing from the contractors is they're like, we get all these leads from HomeAdvisor. We're out in the field all day, as you know, right? Like everything's not, completely running, automated and at the highest efficiency as possible. So they're like, we want phone calls. Like we're getting these. So I was like, oh my God. These guys want phone calls, right? A lot of these tools out there are more built for the enterprise. They're larger, they're heavier, they're expensive. So, as I was leaving mHelpDesk, a couple things, right? I wanted to kind of stay in my lane. And, there's a concept of like founder market fit. So I'm like, all right, like I don't know consumer or enterprise, or e-commerce, right? I only really know SaaS, B2B SaaS, and I only really know SMB, B2B SaaS, right? I don't even know like enterprise SaaS, like in terms of the model and stuff. So I sort of wanted to stay in my lane. I'm like, oh, these guys are, they all want phone calls. I've used tools. I remember, one time like my CFO was like G-chatted me because I was like the chat platform back then. I was like, yo, what's up? What's this like $1,000 call tracking expense? I was like, oh shit, I don't know. I thought it was like $30. And so then there's variable pricing, which, hey, can you innovate on pricing, product, all these different things, right? So I was like, I think I can. Or I was like, I know I can. So then, I was like, I'll build it on Twilio. Like they're hot right now. Like I'll get some contractors off Upwork, and like, I just need a product. And then like, I'm a sales guy. So I was like, I'll sell it,
Right.
So anyway, so that's what happened. So then I was like, all right, finally got the product built in call it 3-4 months. Very simple. It didn't have a lot of these like features that were going to like really get us to the next level, which I learned later. But basically once I had a product, I would test a bunch of things. So initially I was going direct to the companies. I was calling these plumbing companies, these HVAC companies, all these different companies like, hey, are you spending money on Google? And I would test different scripts, right? So I'm like, hey, I found you guys on this ad. I'm curious, are you able to track when you're getting calls from this ad? Like how's that, how's the ROI or whatever? I forget the exact language of the script. And what we quickly found from doing a lot of different calls to a lot of businesses is they're like, oh, we don't manage that. Like we work with this agency. And we kept getting that over and over and over again. We work with this agency. Like that's not us, not us. And I was like, oh shit, we need to be targeting agencies. Like we can't just target the end businesses. They're not even the ones that manage this. Right. And then we found like, all right, we go to these agencies, and there's like different like tiers of agencies. There's like super legit, like Madison Ave, like big agencies, project management tools, they'll give you a team. And then there's these like, and then on the other extreme, there's like the guy in his hometown that like manages some restaurants, he's in like Idaho, and he's like, yo, I got these like 4 restaurants, and he like, loves Gary Vee, and he like just, creates landing pages and he does it, and it works. He makes great money, and he has all these end businesses. And then there's like a middle spectrum where they like, so we weren't targeting the big agencies. We were actually sort of targeting the lower agencies and the middle-sized agencies, because they're the ones that are, first of all, working with these SMBs, and they're like managing, Google ads, And at the time, Google Ads actually had a published list of their Google certified partners. So you could go and see who was like Google Ads certified. It was like a directory. And I was like, let's scrape that directory, use that as our lead list, call into these guys. It's like, hey, I see that you're, driving ads for your customers. And then the hook was like, are you guys managing, like, do you drive inbound web forms or do you drive phone calls? And they're like, oh, well, we do both. Be like, oh, awesome. So when you get phone calls, are you able to like figure out which phone call turns into a customer? And they're like, no, it's kind of a black box. And be like, oh, awesome. Right. So what we do is we have this tool. We're working with tons of other companies, tons of other agencies. What we're able to do is see the entire customer journey, the online journey and the offline journey. So you're going to get credit for those phone calls as the agency, right? These phone calls, are converting into customers at 5 times the rate of a web lead, right? You don't have to wait for them to not call them back. Isn't it frustrating when the customer doesn't call the lead back? You drove them a high quality lead. So anyway, we would figure out, right, what the script was. We would call into agencies and it was like cold. I mean, it was cold all the way up until we sold. Like, so we would do a lot of cold. Eventually we were able to like sort of target these communities. There's tons of these like Facebook groups that are like Google Ads experts, like tons of these 20K members. But what we did is like, I would become friends with like the admins. Like I would fly to them, I would go to their house, I would take them and their wives like out to dinner, be like, I would become like boys or really close friends with them. And then, as people started posting in the, what tool do you guys use for this? What do you use for call tracking? It's like, then instead of me just going in there and being like a sales guy, it's like them sort of like bottoms up, like, oh, PhoneWagon's awesome, blah, blah, blah. And then, so then we were able to like sort of penetrate a lot of these like groups and communities, but like kind of more organically than just like going in, it's like a sales guy going into a bar and trying to like sell it. It's like, whoa, bro, like relax. That's not
right.
the place.
Yeah. So, what I love about that story is that, once you developed your product, so you had your product, but you had to take it to market and you physically had to be the one to bring it to market. So you had to pick up the phone and then go through the paces of figuring out how to connect with the right customer. I'm curious how many of those calls you made before you realized, oh, okay, it's not even the actual businesses that I should be prospecting. It's the actual agencies. And then the work that goes into just identifying who the right agencies are. So, I would imagine, all that front end work, there's a saying that I keep on this poster back here. It's near and dear to my heart. It's feed the wolf. It derives from the phrase, the legs feed the wolf, where I believe that everything is that process. It's the process of going through the paces of the uncomfortable or doing that initial work over and over and over again until you get to, either comfort or to that end goal. And I love this story. I think it's an incredible story to take a product and then have to really literally just drive it into the marketplace and then fine tune it and figure out what's going to work. And then once you found that rhythm of what's working, I would imagine scaling started after that. Once you figured out, okay, but this is the customer that we're looking for is these agencies, these local to mid-sized company agencies, we're trying to target them. Then you can scale it and start adding on additional people to start making those calls. Is that kind of how that process went?
Yeah, and the other thing I want to add too, I think I definitely benefited because, first of all, the experience at mHelpDesk, I saw it at a higher clip, and then also at Yex, just being on the phones. I hear so many times now, and like, hey, I made like 50 calls, and like, no one wants it. Like that's not it. Right. And it's like, all right, well, like how many decision makers did you talk to? Right. And then how many like true yeses, true nos? And I think like just knowing that like you have to put in, you have to like, first of all, look at a large enough data set. And also like one yes out of 100 calls is like success. Like that's scalable. You make one sale per rep per day is like, that's a win. That's like crazy win. Are you kidding me? One sale a day, 20 sales a month for 20 business days. Like, let's fucking go. So like, it's like not giving up too with just, I mean, you're getting punched in the face. You're calling like, fuck off. Like, who are you? Like, stop calling. Right. This sucks. Are you selling me leads? I'm like, no. Like, we're just a tool. Like, we just work with a lot of other people. I'm just curious, you guys try phone calls or is it like just web lead? So you're like just figuring out your angle. And so that's the first thing is like, keep getting enough reps to be able to actually make a decision. Don't try to make your decision early. Don't try to make it without a lot of data. and don't try to make it out of emotions when you're just like beat up and, they're killing your self-confidence.
One thing that I've learned in my days of making cold calls, and this is something I learned from Grant Cardone, is that, oftentimes we run into some standard objections, and there's ways of being able to overcome the vast majority of them. But oftentimes what I've seen in reps is that the objection actually starts with them. They've put the roadblock up before the customer even did. It was a perceived objection that they thought that they were going to get, and it was really an internal objection, or maybe a call reluctance in some cases. But you're absolutely right. What you just said, I mean, if you can go through 100 calls and you land a customer 1 out of 100, I mean, that's a great average. Now, granted, you might have days where it's even better. But if you can make 100 calls and create a customer, especially in a space where I would imagine if you call on an agency and that agency becomes a customer, and correct me if I'm wrong, but once they become a customer, if they have several clients that they can set up on your platform, it could be an even bigger win. Is that correct? Or is it just one purchase and then they were able to scale it out from there?
No, and I think a lot of software tools are like this. There's like sort of land and expand, right? So a lot of times, like, whether it's an agency or even, in other software tools, hey, try us out with one seat, one license, one client if you're an agency, right? Cool. Give it a shot with one of your customers, right? If you like it, you sort of see the value, you're able to, track your marketing spend better, and you're able to maybe trim out some stuff that's not working. Like, let's go ahead and roll it out for, more of your clients, right? So 100%, right? So it's like, let's get them in the door. Let's make that first sale. Let's sort of do this paid pilot, not a free pilot. Let's do this, paid customer, paid license, paid seat, whatever it is, software tool you're selling. And then let's like sort of do beautiful onboarding, white glove onboarding, implementation. Let's get them set up. Let's get them trained. Let's build the habit. And then we'll sort of like expand out from there. And so, so like, that's totally it. That's totally the model. That you're always going for. But back to, I kind of went into like, hey, just like not giving up. But yes, once you figure out, a scalable way, not just like the team and the people, but you also have to be able to feed your reps in terms of like leads, right? So like if the lists dry up, if you're just using a listing of Google certified partners, that might be fire. But like they're going to go through that list in like a week, you know what I mean? So like they have to have the ability to go after, a appropriate amount or a reasonable amount of leads, or else like it's going to dry up. And maybe it's a channel, right? So it's like, cool, we're selling a Salesforce integration product widget, let's call like, these Salesforce certified agencies, these HubSpot elite platinum partners, right? So like, again, those are amazing channels, but like they dry up. There's only like 1,000 of them. So like, so it's the ability to have the enough leads to feed your people. And then the other thing that you didn't ask this question, but I'm going to say it anyway, is like scaling too early, like thinking you have product market fit. And then, for instance, there being like a gap in features or integrations. It's like we thought we were there, but then we didn't have these Salesforce integration, HubSpot integration, Google Ads integration. I'm trying to think like early days, like kind of gaps, right? Initially we didn't have dynamic numbers, which is like a core feature for like tracking phone calls on the web.
Right.
So anyway, like there's this gap of features. So it's like, sure, we were able to get to, we had the lead list. We were able to get to the agency or the decision maker, get them on the phone, agree to a demo. They do the demo. They like the product. And then they're like, all right, cool. Do you have this? And you're like, no. And then you're like, and then you lose the sale. So then it's like such a waste of effort, and all of your metrics would like improve like 5x, if you had that feature, because like, then your cost per acquisition would be like way lower because you're getting like 5 sales instead of 2, right? For the same amount of like cost, in terms of reps. So like that happened to us. And like, that was something that I made the mistake of, like, oh shit, like we weren't really there where we were ready to scale. But like we wanted to, and it's like, you raise money, you're like, all right, scale, let's grow. You're like, hell yeah, we're growing. And then you're like, it's just like not ready. So that's something you have to be like very aware of too.
Yep. Very cool. Man, I had a good question, and it just
Sorry.
No, what you were just dropping, that was gold. So no apology needed. But let me ask this: so where do you see where do you see things going now? What's kind of like the next phase? Is there any platforms that you kind of have your eye on right now that you're thinking, hey, this looks like it might be the next move?
Yeah. So like, I've gone down like a bunch of different paths. I was an early user on so these are more marketplaces and sort of fintechy. So kind of different than B2B SaaS, but like I was an early customer, investor, user of like Fundrise and Cadre, which basically you can buy fractional shares of like real estate. You can put in, 25, 50, 100K and buy like sort of slices of projects and stuff like that. I think that's interesting. And then, Pipe came along. I'm also an angel in Pipe, which I thought Pipe is interesting. So like one thing I looked at is like, all right, can you do a marketplace for people that have money tied up in escrow from acquisitions, right? Like, is there a way to let people invest into, escrow or loans that are secured by escrow or fractional shares of profitable companies? And I know there's this awesome lady on Twitter, Cody Sanchez. You might have heard of her. She makes a ton of content. Like, she's awesome. She buys like cash flowing businesses. She might even have a fund now that might be doing sort of what I was thinking, but like, hey, can you do fractional shares of like either a specific, laundry, something cash flowing, or sort of like a bucket of businesses that are like within a fund or something like that. Like, that's interesting. People want, cash flowing businesses. There's also, a notion. I know this company called Enduring Ventures is essentially doing, roll-up vehicles for a lot of these service-based businesses. So like HVAC companies, they're like buying them up and they're doing like almost like a PE roll-up of them and then sort of like operating them all under one umbrella. Like, that's interesting for sure, because there's a lot of these businesses that like it was like for some reason uncool to like be in the trade. So like there's a lot of these businesses that have owners that are like retiring out and like their kids like don't want their companies anymore. I'm sure if you've talked to, you're in this space, right, and you maybe have talked to them, it's like, hey, what's the like exit plan? It is a service-based business. It requires like work, so you have to have someone that's like running the business, but is there an opportunity to sort of like roll these things up and operate them like really efficiently, whether it's HVAC, plumbing companies, laundromats, something that sort of is cash flowing. And so first of all, that idea is interesting. And then also, an investment vehicle that maybe invests in and like sort of pays dividends, based on the cash flow of it. And then maybe that's a marketplace as well. And then sort of you're democratizing the ability for, people to sort of invest into these companies without having to do a lot of stuff. There's a lot of moving pieces with it. I'm looking into it and I've looked into it, and I think it's, that's interesting. So like, there's that. I also, like, me and a few guys, might put together a fund to sort of invest into, small cell towers on rooftops. So like CBR, or like basically like commercial real estate, you can put like small cell kind of infrastructure. It's called communication infrastructure and cell towers on rooftops. And there's a lot of companies that are like sort of going after that space. And like, the pitch is like everyone has way more connected devices now than they ever did. And they're using more data per device. And, you need, more infrastructure. And then you can now put these towers on rooftops and like the buildings, it's just incremental NOI for the buildings if you put these towers on rooftops. So we're like looking at that space and trying to do a deal, and we might. So like that's something that's like on my radar. And then me and another guy are doing an indoor pickleball club in New York. So we're like creating this like sick members only like pickleball club that's probably going to open in like 2024. But so like. That's not in my in like B2B SaaS or anything, but that's just something that I think is cool. And
before we close out this episode, I always give each guest an opportunity to kind of plug where people can go if they want to try to connect with you, if they want to follow you on social media, or maybe they're just interested in maybe one of the companies that you're involved in. Where should everybody go if they wanted to try to connect with you?
So Twitter and Instagram are Ryan A. Shank. So those are the best places that I'm most active.
Got you. Cool. Yeah. So I want to say I love this episode. I especially like to hear, especially young individuals like yourself. You're a few years younger than me, grew up in the same area as me, to be able to fall into a space that I'm passionate about and excel. It's very cool to see. It's, on the Eastern Shore of Maryland, there's not a ton of young, ambitious people. There are some that definitely are from this area, but to see what you've done over the last 10, 12, 14 years, I guess, somewhere in that ballpark, it's very impressive resume. And I look forward to hearing and seeing what it is that you do as you venture into this next phase. No doubt, if you apply that same work ethic, that same tenacity that brought you success in the several companies that you've been with, there's no doubt in my mind that you're going to excel. But I just want to say I appreciate you taking the time to come on to the show, share, drop some nuggets on us, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. Also impressed with what you're doing. Love that you launched the podcast and sort of the podcast incubator, that I saw that you guys just launched as well, and helping others, launch their own podcast. So thank you so much, and super impressed with what you're doing as well.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
You've been listening to the Lavahot Podcast with Joseph Connell Jr. Do you want to level up your business? Then visit us at golavahot.com for a free marketing analysis.